This is Talking Devils, your favourite Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Barton, joined by the legendary former Manchester United defender, Paul Parker. Paul, how are you doing this week, mate?
I'm not bad at all, Wayne. International football has taken a little bit of, a little bit of oomph out of football as it was starting to kind of fall into place. We get stuck or laden with international football, I should say.
Yeah.
So that'll be gone after the midweek games.
Well, not for you, not yet, because you've got something tonight, right, about the 1990.
Yes, I've got something that should have been done back in May 20. It's called a tribute to 1990. It should have been 30 years after that time, but it's gone to 31 for obvious reasons. And I think there's about half a dozen of us going in the Grand Theatre in Wolverhampton this evening just to chat over that. It's sold out. I'm trying to think who's going. There's myself, Peter Shelton, Glazer, Dave Besson. They're the ones that have come to my head straight away. I think that might be it. I couldn't say really. There's been so much going on, really. And all of a sudden I just woke up this morning remembering that I've got to go to Wolverhampton today. And the only time I've ever been to Wolverhampton was just to play games of football. So this is a new venture as well, getting out of Wolverhampton train station.
It's a nice place. It's a nice area. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook, then feel free to get your questions in. Housekeeping before we always start. Talking Devils brought to you in association with Classic Football Shirts. You can get a 10% discount using TOTD10 at checkout there. And obviously, there'll be some shirts that you might want to get now, some retro shirts that you might want to use that 10% discount on. A couple of recent videos on the website. Phil Marsh and Keane Freeney reviewed the Wolves game on Friday, so we won't be going over Wolves. From this Friday, though, Phil and Keane will be joined by Lee Lawrence, the former United player, on weekly shows as well. But that podcast's exclusive to YouTube, so if you're listening to this, make sure that you're watching that one as well. And yesterday's podcast with Dave Murphy and former United defender Scott Wootton, that was a blockbuster. You will have heard Paul on this podcast telling stories about his encounters with Leeds supporters when he moved to United. Scott moved to Leeds, and some of the story, I'll leave it for their podcast, but some of their stories some of Scott's stories are pretty mad, as you might expect, encountering Leeds fans after, he basically said they became a scapegoat whenever they lost games, which, you can expect being a former United player. But yeah, that's for their podcast. This one's for us. Paul, let's get into this one. 10 days have passed. 7 since it was made official. Cristiano Ronaldo is home. It's one of those where the phones of anyone remotely connected with United were buzzing for about 72 hours non-stop. I had a little bit of it, and I can imagine you were the same, like non-stop, really. And we had a few conversations. And actually, do you know what? It's not a signing that's universally a no-brainer. So now that they've just settled on that, I've had a few conversations with a few former United players who've sort of said, we've got a few little reservations. In the week, obviously, there's been a lot of columns about Ronaldo being a bit of a gamble for United, and he is, without doubt. At least no signing comes without being a gamble, but Ronaldo, for different reasons, is probably a little bit more of one. He answered a lot of those critics with the double that he scored against Ireland to remind everyone how good he is at the moment. Not that most of us needed a reminder, but it was there anyway. Paul, I read your Eurosport column, which basically nailed the points which I have reservations about. I think what it effectively comes down to is the fact that it's a diversion from what Ollie's been building. That it's and we've been big supporters of Ollie on this podcast, and we've almost supported the idea to be patient with him, like say, oh, well, just give him this time, you can see what he's building towards. And like you said on Eurosport, you kind of just went, well, he's made that decision at this point, he's put a lot of pressure on himself, and it changes the goalposts in that narrative a little bit. Is that your main reservation? I mean, talking about Ronaldo as a quality player is one thing, but the actual reservation of why we're bringing him to the club, is it more out of preservation and protection for Ollie?
I look at it. The one question I would like answered, and I think that only comes from Ollie, is to talk about him getting Ronaldo to sign for Manchester United. I want Ollie to talk about what led up to it. Was it the fact of the Man City thing, or was that just a story made to take it away? So then they come in and bang, the story is sold as he was on the verge of signing for City. Manchester United nipped in and took him away from him going to City. I don't really believe that there was any great interest from City. I look at the way City play. I think about Pep Guardiola and his love for Messi. And definitely, again, I say it again, is the way City play does not suit Ronaldo. There's no high crosses going in the box. There's not early balls into the box. They don't play that way. They're very intricate. So it didn't suit the way they played. So he doesn't face up to the ball and people play off of him as a centre forward. He doesn't suit City. So I think that was just, that was someone playing games. That was the agent playing games, and that was a decoy, to be perfectly honest. The biggest question is, did Ollie sign Ronaldo, or was it a fact of something that's come up from overseas? It's a way of putting everything, try and believe, and you're going to put a few things right with a few supporters. If you bring back their most talked about player, since Eric Cantona. Is that the way? Is that their way of doing it? Look at it. He definitely doesn't fit into the way Ollie was going. Now it's virtually like in a traffic jam, all of a sudden you build a flyover to stop the traffic jam, and bang, the traffic gets quicker to one place and it hits the wall. And that's where Ollie could be hitting the wall, because he's now jumped to somebody who has to win something this season, win some.
Let me jump in there. There's a comment from Keane. Ronaldo spoke to a UFC champion last month and told him he was moving to United. I heard that story too, but I mean, how quickly that accelerated into this blockbuster day at United, basically. But the expectation there then, and what he's going to bring. Do you not think that? And we've talked about this. Do we not think that Ollie was in that position anyway? And I agree everything that you're saying about Ronaldo being a complete diversion away from what we were building. But considering that Ollie's in a position where everyone this season was saying you need to win a trophy, and he'd be judged at the end of the season, regardless, is it better to take that gamble? I think it personally is better to take that gamble with Ronaldo than without him.
Without that, you can't, because it's like shying away in his mind, and it'd be something that he'd have to live with for the rest of his life. When he saw something that could be, which gives you a better chance, and he didn't take it because he's worried about the implications if he does get him, if he doesn't win. And in fact, if he thought that way, then in certain ways he shouldn't be managed. He shouldn't be a manager, and he definitely shouldn't be the manager of Manchester United. But I was looking at, and I look at something that was more important, is that. Was he the signing that they needed? Was that the position that really needed nailing down a centre forward for Manchester United? I would say no, it wasn't. I would say central midfield was the issue, and is still the issue at this moment in time. And as good as it, you look at the front line with two aging strikers to pick from. Even though I think the really aging one, the one who's kept himself seriously fit and still got that hunger to score goals, win trophies, win individual awards, I just think that he's going to want to play every single game. Ronaldo, Ollie can't go through that scenario as he did with Cavani, believing he's got to rest him because of his age. Ronaldo's going to want to play. Ronaldo, in a way, dictates to the coach of Portugal. He's virtually like the on-field manager. He dictates and he plays, and you see the players, what they got Portugal, but Portugal have to play to suit him. So his style of play has to change. There has to be more early balls into the box. And to be fair, Fernandes does that every single time. He gets on the ball, and his first look is, can he put something in at an angle into the box just to get him behind? And he uses that for his devices to mix his game up. So people are always thinking what he's going to do next, which is fantastic. Ronaldo's going to want that more often than not. When you look at the left side, Luke Shaw never hits anything early. Luke Shaw now has gone from a full-back who wouldn't run forward and he couldn't run back because he wasn't fit enough, to a to now a fullback who constantly gets his head down and wants to dribble. He has stopped crossing the ball. Ronaldo's going to want deliveries into the box. You've got the other side, Wan-Bissaka, who is very nervous about crossing the ball because he's worried about making a mistake. That's in the fullback area. So the team has to change in the way they play. Ollie's got to look at a different way of playing to suit Ronaldo, because Ronaldo plays one way at centre forward, and that is virtually, as soon as that ball gets in wide areas, he's in a position, as we've seen the game against Ireland, he's there to attack the ball.
Yeah.
As simple as that. So playing intricate and trying to play through that way, if you're going to play that way for 90 minutes, teams are just going to drop deeper and deeper and not allow it to happen. With Ronaldo, and if you play to his strengths, teams will have to push up that bit higher. They do not want to be in the box if the ball's been delivered. They're going to have to work hard to stop people getting in behind them. So he is going to change it. It will make United more on the way that everyone of our generation anyway, well, of my generation I should say, otherwise if I say ours then I'm putting you down as being my age, so I do apologise, but they're going to have to change the way and go back to what, the cavaliering forward, everyone going forward to play that way. And you can't do it when you've got two midfield players who are, creativity-wise, they're lacking. You need at least one of them who is industrious but creative as well in deeper areas, who can make those runs forward. Because, in the game today, we just give someone a name, you get someone and straight away they're marked up as defensive midfield player.
Did you
which is a massive get-up.
We'll go to the midfielder in a moment, but it's interesting that you say that. I was reading a thing about Jude Bellingham this morning, and the reason why he wears number 22 is because when he was younger, they said that he was like a number 8, a number 6, and a number 4 or something like that. They basically said like he was all this number of different combinations of players, and when you added them all up, it was 22, which I think is a nice kind of thing, because it's saying that Bellingham's one of these players who can do it all, and it's refreshing to hear a player behave like that and sort of say, "No, I'll take on extra responsibilities."
But you look at that lad, Wayne, and everything you're saying there is everything that I believe that a midfield player is. You just couldn't slap a name on. I name the usual suspects. You couldn't slap you couldn't identify them in one position of the likes of Robson, Keane, or Ince.
Yeah,
they was all over the place, and dare I say on this podcast, Steven Gerrard. You couldn't just suddenly go, "Oh, he was a defensive midfield player." Yeah, he defended. Oh, but even though he was an attacking midfield player, yeah, he attacked. He wanted to be everywhere in and around that ball because he played with his heart on his sleeve. And all the three players who I named all did that as well, the same as Gerrard. So Paul Scholes was an attacking midfield player. Of course he was, because those little passes are in between. There was no one better than Scholes at doing that. But Scholes was great in deep positions, like Fernandes. He looked for those balls into areas in behind.
Yeah.
Progressive passing, not just the simple passing of just knocking out wide and you get a clap from the fans because you knocked the ball under no pressure, 60 yards to someone on the touchline, and you get clapped for it. Blimmin' hell. What a game that is today. Amazing that is. Under no pressure, you knock a ball 60 yards, a bit of air on it, and it hits a player and everyone claps. That's where he'd gone to. Scholesy went more difficult. He didn't come off the pitch having 99% passing ratio because he made difficult passes, so they didn't work. So we are looking now at central midfield players. You talk about Bellingham, and I was there yesterday. I went to the game. It wasn't for the football. Someone gave me some really good tickets, so it definitely wasn't about going and watch Andorra play. But you just looked at him and you go, "What a midfield player!" You think so. He could play next to Declan Rice, and it would add that little bit more in that midfield because he was their best player. He was England's best player and everything he tried to do. But as you mentioned, 22 means there's an assortment of positions on the field where if you get a number, you wear number 4, and it means you sit deep. You become Jordan Henderson. As exciting as someone blowing their nose behind you. It's just no, it's not. It's not. You want more from a midfield player. I lived in a world as when we done fitness work. Midfield players would win anything long, anything that was anything about the distance running, anything like that. They was the best. They was the better athlete. Roy was an incredible athlete. Robbo was an incredible athlete. Paul Ince didn't want to lose to anybody. He was an incredible athlete. So it was just all of that's how it was. That should never change. It shouldn't be taken out of our game, but it is, because straight away we're just identifying people and we're pinning them down to being one position. So Ollie has gone back to where he should be. Is that we really still need to look. We didn't look at it, and somewhere along the line, Van der Beek has to be given an opportunity. He has to be. It's just getting seriously embarrassing now, and it's been talked about more and more. I'm noticing little bits now. His agent's now coming out and saying something, and no one's going to persecute his agent at this moment in time, because it's blatantly obvious that someone needs to speak up on that lad's behalf.
Yeah. We'll get to him in a moment. Morning, Mike. For those listening back to this, they might think it's a bit weird that I've just said morning, Mike, in the middle. That's the comments on YouTube coming through. Right, so I'm going to go into a little rant, Paul. You know how I like to do this. I'm not going to ask you for your opinion on this, because it's just my 2 pence on it. And you've mentioned a few points on that anyway, so I'll be coming back to them. But I'll definitely go into the Van der Beek one in a moment. So the Ronaldo signing has brought up all these questions about the owners again. And you've mentioned, like I said earlier, you said about it being an opportunistic gamble. Was it something that they saw that they couldn't miss up? You know, and I understand that, because Ronaldo is a special case. But the question then becomes, if they had that collateral to put up for a signing like Ronaldo, why didn't they see the investment in midfield as an equal emergency prior to Ronaldo coming? Because that was the emergency. And I think that's the question. If it goes badly, a lot of people will be asking about the owners at a time when the owners are trying to rebuild some of that relationship. Now, Ronaldo's a signing that could very well pay for itself financially to a large extent. But it's the concern that when it came to the crux, the day before this rumour broke, if you ask most people, like you said earlier, do we need a striker or a midfielder? They would have said the latter. And that's a concern about what the priorities are of the owners, especially with the news that Richard Arnold looks like he's going to be the one who's following Ed Woodward. So it's literally just the same thing repeating itself above Ollie. But what I really wanted to talk about from that point is the supporters' relationship with the Glazers. And that's why I didn't want to sort of bring you into this, Paul, because it's not your place to talk about that. Like, I support the protests, maybe not the extent we saw them at when they invaded Old Trafford, but I understood why we needed to do that and why sometimes that's necessary for change. I've written many times about how the ownership has restricted the managers. I've included Moyes and Van Gaal and Mourinho in those summaries. In fact, I wrote an entire book about it, defending the managers in the face of the restrictions that they had imposed on them from above. But the protest in April was, as I saw it, about one of two things: either to force the owners to sell or force them to communicate better. They committed to the second one. You can't force a multi-billion company. They can't force the owners to just sell it in the middle of a pandemic. It's not reasonable. So what they asked them to do, this group of protesting supporters, which I believe these were the two options they gave them: communicate better with us, make things better for us as supporters, basically prove that you're better owners, or sell up. Now, it's not perfect. It's working slowly. Supporter groups are affecting change for match day support, which I think is a massive thing that the online support doesn't really get. There's a culture and heritage group that's been set up that looks at the ways of respecting the club's history, which is going to include a statue of Jimmy Murphy, for example. There's a promise of investment to stadium and facilities. I'm not saying support the owners, but change takes time. And I want to see how that pans out, even if the last week or so will probably have you feeling more cautious than you might have done 2 weeks ago. Even though we've signed Ronaldo, you might look at that and think, oh, God, it's the same old thing again. But how it affects us as fans is a different thing, because our relationship with the club is the team. It's not really anything else apart from the team. And everyone's version of the protest since 2005 was different. For a while, I didn't buy shirts and I stopped going to games. Then I missed going to games and started going again, especially because I started seeing a girl who, we hadn't really gone to games, and I wanted to go there. We got a season ticket, gave it up for personal reasons, not because of the owners, gave it up for personal reasons. I still hadn't bought shirts for a long time until recently. My nephew got into football, and we took him to the ground, and he wanted a shirt, and he wanted me to have the same shirt. So even though I don't really wear it, I got one. Then this story of Ronaldo broke, and like you mentioned Cantona earlier, and that's a perfect description, Paul, because Cantona is basically this generation's Ronaldo. He's one of the biggest players. He's basically like Cantona coming back 2 years after he retired. It's exactly like that. Ronaldo is one of the greatest players in history, and it's a massive, massive event in football. Probably the biggest transfer of all time. So it meant when they released the shirt, that occasion was mad as well. You know, obviously it was going to be mad at Old Trafford. Everyone wanted to be the first to get the shirt. I was no different. I got a few people around the world saying, you know, because I know loads of sort of supporters around the world who wanted the shirt. So I went down to Old Trafford to get them. I wasn't the first in line. I was for a bit, and I had to go away. Came back, and there were people in front of me. Obviously, the queue was growing. It was pretty mad. I was the first to get the full set of shirts, the home, away, and third, even though none of them were for me. But I understood they wanted those shirts. There's a little lad who got the blue and white shirt from the trio that I got, who was the first person in the world to get the Ronaldo 7 shirt, basically. And he lives in California. And he's absolutely buzzing with the fact that he got the first blue and white Ronaldo shirt. It's an international event, whether or not, you know, we like it. And if you don't indulge in that, you're missing out on the generational aspects of being a football fan. They're not going to sell as a result of the protests, as a result of me not going. And I think it's too easy for people online to have a pop at someone who goes to games and keeps their season tickets, or someone who buys more merchandise than someone else. At this point, I'm talking at this point, 15 years on, 16 years on, because we're talking about a generation of ownership. I understand that a lot of fans still feel disenfranchised, and more power to them for being able to stay away from that. But for me now, I just wanted to be able to say that as fans, we should recognise that really we're just people with different feelings, different thresholds, different relationships with the football team. Some want to go to the game, especially after missing it for 18 months, and perhaps losing people in that time that they went to games with. That to them is bigger than the ownership, and as well it should be. It's a personal thing that matters to each of us differently. And also hats off to those fans who are in dialogue, looking for everyday change with the owners, because they're doing that in the face of criticism from people online who are saying, oh, they should sell up, look at you selling out. No, they're actually working to get change for the matchday supporters, like cheaper beer. Everyone keeps going on about that. But they're working to make that change, which is what the protests were about. It's not about telling them to sell up for 4 billion because it's so unrealistic. So you've got the second option. They're working slowly. Don't start getting on everyone's back now that the relationships with the football team are going to change in the wake of this change. The conversation with the owners is shifting. So let's appreciate that as fellow fans, we've got different relationships with the club anyway. So don't get on them if they've got a shirt, or if they're good at their games, or if they get merchandise. Just see how it pans out. Give them the chance. Do you know, it's a generation. If people have stayed away for a generation, 15, 16 years, that's a long time to sort of have a disconnect with the football club that you support. And just me being reconnected with it in a little bit I can see how difficult it's been. And it has been difficult for me as well. And I don't like the idea that the division continues now when we're in the early stages, really, of trying to impact that change. That's what I had to say about that. Lucy, who's a season ticket holder, she said everyone's entitled to their opinion. Far too many online who never go are just keyboard warriors. I've been mocked online for keeping my season ticket, but being back was amazing. I can't wait for Saturday. That's the thing, Paul. Saturday's becoming an international event. Rant over, midfield. You want to get back to that. It was a disaster against Wolves. Fred doesn't have the positional discipline to play in games alongside Pogba. Matic probably doesn't have the legs now. I don't think it really works when Matic and Pogba played together. Van der Beek, you mentioned, probably now the gamble, but all he's having to take gambles. He doesn't normally like to. Let's be fair, he's more of an attacking player anyway, but he's still better on the ball than the other players that we've got in there. You feel that maybe in home games, him and Pogba might be worth trying in the middle. Does that make Pogba the issue? We'll be trying to shoehorn him in.
again, I think Pogba's one of those players who just he looks around, and if he looks at as somebody and he doesn't respect him as a player, then that comes out, that shows in his game. That when he's been caught in possession and there's people screaming for the ball and he's looking at him, he's going, "You can't keep it. I can do better than you." And he's been caught out so many times. When he's flowed, there isn't many better. But I think it's about appreciation, respect for the people around him. Now, Pogba's going to be a different entity with Ronaldo because he's going to want to kind of at least kind of be on par with him. That's what he's going to be looking at. He ain't going to allow him to take away what he sees as his mantle. No different to Fernandes. He's going to want that little bit. Yes, someone who he knows, and he's mostly was watching him as a younger person back at home as well. Now he's playing with Ronaldo as he does, for his national team. Now he's got him at club level. He might go a little bit personal as well, want to prove a point and maybe not allow Ronaldo to take everything from him, which he's earned the right to be in that position. It depends if he grabs it. And it is about grabbing it. It's not about sulking about it. You've got to get on with it, and you're hoping that Pogba and him do not. Those two in midfield make a difference. Van der Beek will add to it because ball retention is going to have to become quite key. Yeah. When you've got a Ronaldo in your team, you can't suddenly see him and use him as a hit and hope. People have got to realise that you can't always give him the ball. Don't suddenly feel that it's Ronaldo because he's asked for the ball doesn't mean you've got to give it to him. That's the biggest problem that happens, and especially as well because he can be very dramatic if he doesn't get what he wants. And that's where Ollie has got to now really stand firm. Ollie, and I've never really understood it, but now I'm looking at the most successful sides. I'm looking at their managers, and they're there on the touchline, and they're conducting. They're orchestrating the play. When you look at Tuchel, you watch him, and you're seeing already he plays a major part in the way he manages his players. He's quite passive in a way, but you can see he is on edge. He is leading them with a strong voice, and the players' reaction to him is incredible. Ollie just sits back, and the only time he steps up is when something's blatantly wrong. He doesn't get, he should be there good, bad, or indifferent to be around. Michael Carrick getting up doesn't add anything, in my opinion.
Do you think that's the trust part, isn't it, with Ollie, that he trusts the players and sort of allows them? You know what I mean? Like we've said that about the faith that he puts in them, and like you said, it's like when it's an emergency, he sort of steps in, but generally, just now and then you hear him shouting, Donny from the bench.
Yeah, no, I know, but he needs a bit more than that, Wayne. And I think what he does as well, it helps with the crowd as well. They see him there, and they want to see him get up. Like people loved it when Sir Alex got up because that meant that there was something that he wasn't entirely happy with, and it wasn't about sending Kiddo out there to kind of get something right tactically. Someone needed a kick, a kick up the bottom, a livener. And you didn't have to. He didn't have to say anything. The moment he stood up, the boss, and you was on the other side of the field, and you knew that you was in trouble. You knew that something weren't right. He'll get the message across to you, and by the time it got to you, you was thinking yourself, I better do something right because I've got to go and face that man in the dressing room. If he was on the near side to him, then you had a really big problem because you're just the last place you want to be as a right back with a boss there on the halfway line. You're about to take a throw in, and he is giving you everything, and you just got to get on with it. You didn't react to it because then that's like you come across as disrespectful to your boss, which wasn't the right thing to be doing. You listened to it and you knew. I just think there's something is needed, and I think Ollie can make the difference on that side. To be perfectly honest, maybe it's the habit of what we're seeing with via lockdown when he had no one around him. He was sitting there looking at his iPad. He couldn't communicate with anybody. He needed someone then to go up, but he maybe didn't have that. Mickey Phelan was brilliant. Mickey Phelan spent a lot of time when he was working with the boss. He was stepping up quite a bit, and Mick had a good understanding with the players. He was respected as a player when he was there, and when you become an assistant manager, then to done what he's done, to then been allowed to be assistant to the boss tells you what that he had the full backing of the boss to make. Because Brian Robson never got that. Steve Bruce never got that. Mickey Phelan did. Brian McClair never got that.
Yeah.
So that tells you how strong Mickey Phelan was and how strong he still is at Old Trafford.
Yeah, Lucy says 100% major match day criticism of Ollie is the sitting down. You want to see him up, and the players need it as well. He should be there conducting and leading. Perhaps we won't need that against Newcastle on Saturday. Predictably difficult start for them. 2 defeats, 1 draw in very bizarre circumstances. Joe Willock, their only signing of note. Things not looking great. They're always having the perennial ownership struggle there. The dislike for Steve Bruce for some reason. It's been difficult for him as well. You know that they're going to be resolute, but we couldn't have asked for a better team to face, really. You would have thought, Paul, international event. I said it earlier, but it really is, isn't it? Ronaldo's return. It's going to be the biggest game anywhere in the world this weekend. The cameras are going to be everywhere. Firstly, do you start Ronaldo? Secondly, how do you reckon the game's going to go?
What did you just ask me? Is he going to start Ronaldo?
Well, people are asking.
Well, he can't. I mean, I question him not giving Sancho a start to come straight in, and at the moment he seems to be not got going yet, to be honest. And I think sometimes you need to just get him straight out there. There's no way in a million years can you have Ronaldo on the bench. That would be ludicrous if he considers doing that. Ronaldo would not allow that to happen. All this, playing games and he needs a rest. He's not bothered. He sets himself challenges, what he wants to do. One of them is to win same with United again, and he'd want that. Can you imagine if he won a European Cup again with United?
Don't get me
started. That's the kind of standards that he would set himself. The challenges, I should say. He's going to want to win the Golden Boot, so that means he's going to want to play in every game left to make sure he gets in and around winning it. So you don't talk about resting him and trying to get him off the bench. That ain't going to work because he'd be the worst sub in the world, especially when things ain't going right. So Ollie has to get him on the field ASAP. And there's a lot of people who are paying silly money to turn up at Old Trafford and they don't want to be singing about a player they idolise while he's on the bench. So, but we have to remember as well, there's another team on that pitch as well. And as the saying goes, they're going to turn up and want to be party poopers. And Newcastle get some good results in certain games, and we call them strange, but they do get their nick results. Steve Bruce, the back end of the season, he had a good run in, and they got unbelievable results. And that's the way they are. Yes, they've had a poor start, and Brucey doesn't deserve what he's getting, but it's a big occasion. You can't switch off and just expect it to happen because everyone's singing and dancing about one individual who's come back to Old Trafford. So just still got to be careful as far as I'm concerned. It's still a top division game. It's up against a big club in Newcastle. I'm sure the Geordie fans are enjoying themselves and as much as they're going to want to turn around and have a go at Manchester United and the fans and whatever. A lot of those fans as well cannot believe their luck or couldn't believe their luck that they had a ticket to come down and all of a sudden the game has turned into a festival. So long as people don't turn up with tents and those kind of funny festival hats and flowery shirts, it should be okay.
So I've got to put my flowery shirt away then. That's there you go. It's going to be a tough one. Tough one to predict. I mean, I'm with you. Ronaldo's got to start. It's a massive global event. United have got to sort of kick on really, and they need a big performance after the Wolves game, I think. That's the bigger picture of the thing. Away from the festival, as you called it, there's a football game to be played, and serious ambitions for United. And even though it's only one game, it's one game where of 38 where Ollie's got to get that system right. He's got to start from day one with that, and get down to business with it. Anyway, we'll be back next week to talk about it. Remember TOTD before we go, Mike. Any spares? There we go. Not yet, Mike, but keep your ear to the ground. Remember TOTD 10 for 10% discount with classic football shirts. Please leave us a nice review or rating on Apple Podcasts if you enjoyed the show. And we'll be back next week. Stay safe, stay well, and thanks for listening and watching.